Hello MCU fans! Today is the third video in my series on closing down the MCU in 2025, and we will be looking at the state of 268 villains across the MCU. Should be lots of fun. Now there will be spoilers for pretty much everything that's come out so far, but as long as you're okay with that, then let's dive right in and see what we can find out. Don't forget, we have a November contest running all month long. Be a subscriber, leave a comment, and 5 random winners can win a book or a steelbook. Best of luck. Plus, we have a membership option with lots of cool perks, so you might check it out. And I haven't done a member shout out in a while, so thank you to everyone that's been a member for less than a month, for 1 month, for 2 to 5 months, for 6 to 11 months, for a full year, but less than 2 years, and finally for 2 full years. So I want to give a big thanks to all the members. You help support this channel so I can make these videos. And also, hang around to the end, and we'll talk about the What If Pitch contest on the Discord. All right, so categories for the villains will be dead, which means as far as we can tell, they are truly dead, versus alive, and if you don't see the body, they are likely alive. On probation, meaning they're no longer villainous, but they haven't yet done a heroic act. And by the way, anti-heroes will also fit in this category. And finally, reformed, meaning they're no longer villainous and they have performed some heroic act. And we're going to focus on the main villains. I mean, there's tons of scattered villains throughout the MCU, but there's still 268 that I would consider main villains. Also, I will use a red square to indicate if someone is appearing a second time. You'll see why that's so important in the count. And lastly, a dotted line square will indicate they're a variant or from somewhere else in the multiverse. And then one last quick thing to mention, the overall order will be release order, but for these 3 prequel movies, Captain America, Captain Marvel, and Black Widow, it's just impossible to keep track of the counts unless we put them in the right order. So speaking of, we start with Captain America, the First Avenger. We have the Red Skull, Heinz Kruger, and Arnim Zola. By the end of the movie, 1 dead and 2 are alive. Next, we have Captain Marvel. That movie gave us Yon-Rogg, Minerva, Atlas, Bron-Char, Talos, Ronan, Korath, the Supreme Intelligence, and Norex, the Science Guy. By the end of the movie, we have 1 dead and 2 reformed, but as we're going to see, many times when you become a reformed villain, you end up a dead villain. So farewell to Norex, the Science Guy. Next, we have Iron Man. That gave us Obadiah Stane, Raza with the 10 rings, and William, who of course was famously yelled at because Tony Stark built his suit in a cave with a box of scraps. By the end of the movie, 2 are dead and 1 is alive. And of course, we'll see William again in Far From Home. Next, we have Incredible Hulk. That gave us the Abomination, General Ross, and Samuel Stearns, who will ultimately become the leader. By the end of the movie, all of them are alive, and amazingly, all of them end up returning. Next, we have Iron Man 2. That gave us Whiplash, my main man, the dancing Justin Hammer, and Senator Stern. Of course, we will later learn that he's Hydra, so that's why he's going to be considered a villain for this movie. By the end, we have 1 dead and 2 left alive. Then we have Thor. Thor gave us Loki, Laufey, the Destroyer, and Sitwell. Another example of someone that we later find out is Hydra, so he is definitely listed as a villain here. By the end of the movie, 2 are dead, or I guess in the case of the Destroyer, he's destroyed, and 2 are left alive. Then we have the Avengers. The Avengers gave us the Chitauri, Thanos, the Other, the Return of Loki, and the Return of Sitwell. So here's an example where the count won't go up if someone has returned from an earlier appearance, and that's why at the end of the movie, the alive count only goes up by 3, because only 3 of them are new villains. Next, we have Iron Man 3. That gave us Aldrich Killian, Maya, the Extremis Warriors, Trevor, and that evil Vice President. At the end of the movie, we have 3 dead and 2 reformed, although once again, reformed villains often end up dead villains. R.I.P. Maya. Next, we have Thor the Dark World. That gave us Curse, Malekith, the Return of Loki, and the Collector. By the end of the movie, 2 are dead and 2 are left alive. And I am considering the Collector a villain. That dude is very, very sketch. All right, so then we have Captain America, the Winter Soldier, and this one starts to get a little wild. We have the return of Sitwell, Pierce, Rumlow, Rollins, the return of Arnim Zola, Batrick, List, and Baron von Strucker in the post-credit scene, the return of Senator Stern, and of course, the Winter Soldier. So by the end of the movie, we have 3 that died, 1 reformed, and everyone else is left alive. But the alive count is sneaky because some of the people that came in alive moved to the dead category. So yeah, really confusing at first. I was told there would be no math, right? But I promise, they're all correct. All right, so then we move on to Guardians of the Galaxy. We have the return of the Collector, Yondu, the return of Korath and Ronan, the return of Thanos, Nebula, and the return of the Other. Lots of carnage in this movie because by the end, we have 3 that are dead, and I'm going to leave Yondu on probation. I mean, I know he did some heroic things, but he also wanted the Power Stone for himself, and who knows what he would have done with that. So next we move to Daredevil Season 1. Such a good season, right? So we have Kingpin, Wesley, Leland, Madame Gao, Nobu, and the Russians, Vladimir and Anatoly. And no surprise, in a Netflix show, lots of carnage. So 5 dead and 2 left alive. Next, we move to Avengers Age of Ultron. That gives us Ultron, Klaw, the return of Strucker and Lisk, and of course Quicksilver and Wanda. By the end of the movie, 3 are dead and 2 are reformed. But unfortunately for Quicksilver, he follows that pattern of reforming and then dying. And then I realize it's a little confusing whether Ultron is truly dead. I mean, can you wipe out an AI? I mean, Vision thought he did. We'll find out more when Vision Quest arrives. Next, we have Ant-Man. That gave us Yellow Jacket and that elusive Mitchell Carson that took off with those Pym particles. So by the end of the movie, both are alive, because obviously Yellow Jacket will return as MODOK in Quantumania. Next, we have Jessica Jones Season 1 with one of the best all-time villains in the MCU, Kilgrave. And then there's Will Simpson, who caused a lot of problems throughout the season. So by the end of the season, 1 dead, 1 left alive. Next, we have Daredevil Season 2. So that brings us the return of the Kingpin, who's now in jail, the Punisher, Elektra, the Blacksmith, Nobu, who actually starts the season dead, and Madame Gao. During the season, Nobu is resurrected, so he's back in play. And then by the end of the season, I'm going to mark the Punisher as on probation, because that also includes anti-heroes. I mean, dude's willing to kill people, hard to make him a hero. Then we have Elektra, who's reformed, and the Blacksmith, who's dead. However, following the pattern of reformed heroes, Elektra dies, but at least Nobu dies as well. So yeah, these resurrections are making life confusing, and we've only gotten started on all the crazy resurrections in the Netflix shows. Next, we move to Captain America Civil War. We have Rumlow, who's now going under the name Crossbones. We have Baron Zemo, my man Zemo. And then we have General Ross, who's finally returned from way back in the Incredible Hulk movie. By the end of the movie, 1 dead and 2 alive. Next, we have Black Widow. That gives us that scumbag Dreykov, Red Guardian and Melina, Taskmaster, the return of Ross, Val, and Yelena. So thank God by the end of the movie, Dreykov is dead, right? Then we have Red Guardian and Melina, who are reformed. Now, I'm going to have to leave Taskmaster as on probation because she stopped being villainous but didn't really do anything heroic. Now, Ross, I'm going to leave as a villain. He's been a problem from the start and has never really reformed. Val, on the other hand, I'm going to put her on probation. She's just incredibly sus, but hasn't done anything villainous herself. But Yelena, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to list her as a villain. She's willing to take sketch information and go and kill Hawkeye. And yeah, you could argue Val gave her the information, but I kind of think Val was misled by the Kingpin. We'll talk more about that when we get to Hawkeye. All right, so then we move on to Luke Cage Season 1. We get Cottonmouth, incredible villain, Mariah Dillard, Diamondback, and Shades. By the end of the season, Cottonmouth dead, what a bummer. Everybody else still alive. Then we move to Doctor Strange. That gave us Dormammu, Caecilius, and Mordo. By the end of the movie, Caecilius, I'm going to call him dead. I know technically he isn't dead, but he's really facing a fate worse than death, so we're not going to see him again. And then 2 others alive. Then we move to Iron Fist Season 1. That gives us Howard Meacham, Bakuto, Davos, and the return of Madame Gao. Love me some Madame Gao. By the end of the season, 2 dead and 2 alive. Then we move to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. We have Ego, fantastic villain. We have Taserface, who I'm using to represent pretty much all the Ravagers. We have Aisha, the return of Nebula, and the return of Yondu, who is on probation. By the end of the movie, 2 dead and 2 reformed. But once again, if you get reformed, you often end up dead. R.I.P. Yondu. And that death was painful, right? Might be one of the saddest deaths in the MCU. Definitely right up there in the top 3. Next, we move to Spider-Man Homecoming. Lots of cool villains in this movie. Shocker 1, Shocker 2, Vulture, the Tinkerer, hopefully the Prowler one day, and most definitely going to be the Scorpion one day. At the end of the movie, only 1 dead and 5 alive. All right, so then we move to Defenders Season 1. That gives us Alexandra Reed, Sawandi, Murakami, Madame Gao, Bakuto, and Elektra. Of course, Bakuto and Elektra come in dead, but before long, they're both resurrected. Oh my goodness. But by the end of the season, we have 3 dead and 1 reformed. So man, These resurrections just need to stop, right? But anyway, as for Elektra, I'm just going to leave her as reformed and alive. We didn't see her die, and she may show up again in Daredevil Born Again Season 2 or Season 3. All right, so on to Thor Ragnarok. What an incredible movie. We have Surtur, Hela, the Executioner, Fenris, the Grandmaster, Valkyrie, the Return of Loki, and Topaz. So by the end of the movie, tons of death. Oh my word. 4 dead, but also 3 reformed. And of course, if you get reformed, there's a good chance you end up dying. So yeah, R.I.P. Executioner. And I really hope we see the Grandmaster again. Dude has to come back at some point. Next, we have Punisher Season 1. That gives us Billy Russo, William Rollins, and Carson Wolf. By the end of the season, 2 are dead, but actually, Billy Russo probably wishes he was dead, right? All right, so next we move to Black Panther. That gives us Killmonger, N'Jabu, M'Baku, W'Kabi, and Claw. By the end of the movie, 3 are dead, 1 is reformed, and I'm going to keep W'Kabi on probation. I mean, he was supposed to show up in Wakanda forever, so then we would know more about his situation, but I also think he was supposed to show up in prison. So for now, he's going to be on probation. Then we move to Jessica Jones Season 2. We get Jessica's mom. Oh, she was the worst. I'm sorry. She was just the worst. And then we get Will Simpson. So by the end of the season, she's dead and he is reformed, which unfortunately means he ends up dead as well. Next, we have Avengers Infinity War, and it is starting to get crazy. We have the return of Thanos, the introduction of his Black Order, the return of the Collector, Ross, and the Red Skull from all the way back in Captain America the First Avenger, and the return of the reformed Loki. By the end of the movie, we have 5 deaths, including, unfortunately, the reformed Loki. He managed to survive one movie reformed, but ultimately got killed in the next one. Next, we go to Luke Cage Season 2. We have the Bushmaster, the return of Mariah Dillard, and of Shades. By the end of the season, 1 death and 2 alive. Next is Ant-Man and the Wasp. That gives us Sonny Birch, Ghost, Goliath, Usman the Truth Serum Guy, and Elias Starr, a.k.a. Egghead. By the end of the movie, 1 is dead, and I'm going to keep both Ghost and Goliath as on probation. I mean, they seemed to stop doing evil, but then again, they were willing to let Janet basically die. So yeah, keeping them on probation for now. Next is Iron Fist Season 2. That gave us the return of Davos, an evil turn by Joy Meacham, and Mary Walker, a.k.a. Typhoid Mary. By the end of the season, I think Joy was reformed, but I'm going to keep Mary Walker on probation. She didn't really do anything heroic necessarily, but I do hope she returns. Really interesting character. Next, we have Daredevil Season 3. That gave us the return of Kingpin and the introduction of Bullseye, 2 amazing villains. By the end of the season, both were alive, and of course, both are returning in Daredevil Born Again Season 2. Cannot wait. Next is Punisher Season 2. That gave us the return of Jigsaw, as well as the Pilgrim and the Schultzes, who were pretty much running the show throughout the season. By the end of the season, we have 3 dead, and I'm going to keep Pilgrim on probation. I mean, he didn't really do anything heroic by the end. Probably won't ever see him again, but he was definitely an interesting character. All right, so now we have Avengers Endgame, and this one is crazy. So we have the return of Thanos, the 2014 variant of Thanos, 2012 variant of Loki, 2014 variant of Nebula, the Black Order, and the Chitauri, Ross, the 2012 variant of Sitwell, Pierce, Rollins, and Rumlow, and the 2014 variant of the Red Skull. Whew, now that is craziness. By the end of the movie, we have 8 dead, we have Ross still on probation, do not trust that guy, and then we have 5 of the branches that supposedly were clipped, so I'm just going to call them poof, gone, like they were never even there. And then, of course, we have Loki, who was captured by the TVA. And then we finally wrap up the Netflix shows with Jessica Jones Season 3. We have Hellcat taking a villainous turn, and the Fool Killer. By the end of the season, 1 dead, and I'm going to keep Hellcat on probation. I mean, she is basically in jail, so she hasn't had a chance to do anything heroic yet. Then we move to Spider-Man Far From Home. We get the awesome villain Mysterio, one of the best in the MCU by far. We get Williams showing up from all the way back in the first Iron Man movie. We get Janice and Gutman, part of Mysterio's crew, and of course, J. Jonah Jameson himself. By the end of the movie, 1 dead and 4 alive. And I realized they didn't really confirm whether Mysterio was dead, but considering the trouble Peter was in No Way Home, they must have found his body, because you don't arrest somebody if they don't have a dead body. Next, we have WandaVision. That gives us Agatha, Wanda, who's currently reformed, White Vision, Hayward, and Ralph Boner. By the end of the season, we have Wanda moving to on probation. I mean, she's reading the Darkhold. No good's going to come from that, as we'll see in Multiverse of Madness. We have White Vision, who hasn't really done anything heroic. He just kind of bolted. And Ralph Boner, dude, for now, we got to keep you on probation. Very, very sus. Next, we have Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So we have Carly Morgenthau, who's representing all of the Flag Smashers, U.S. Agent, the return of Batrick and Zemo, the return of Val, who's on probation, and then Sharon Carter, the Power Broker. By the end of the season, we have 2 that are dead. I'm going to put U.S. Agent on probation because he's still working with Val, and that ain't good. Obviously, Zemo's got to be on probation. No one trusts Val. She's on probation. And man, Sharon majorly took a villainous turn. Will we ever see her plotline resolved? Please, Marvel. I want to know what's up with her. Next, we have Loki Season 1. That gave us He Who Remains, Ravonna, Alioth, Classic Loki, 2012 Variant Loki, and Sylvie, who technically is also a Variant Loki. By the end of the season, we have 1 dead, Classic Loki reformed, 2012 Variant Loki reformed, but man, I'm going to keep Sylvie a villain. I mean, she basically killed He Who Remains, didn't care what happened next, and took off to the McDonald's branch. So yeah, she is villainous for now. But one more update, sometimes those reformed villains end up dead villains. Bye-bye, Classic Loki. Man, he was so cool too, so cool. Then we move to What If Season 1. That gave us Infinity Ultron, Infinity Killmonger, Arnim Zola, and Strange Supreme. By the end of the season, 1 dead and 1 reformed. Next, we have Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. It gives us Wenwu, the Dweller in Darkness, the Death Dealer, the Abomination finally returning from way back in the Incredible Hulk days. Of course, we saw him in those cage matches. And we have Razor Fist and Jai Ling. By the end of the movie, 2 are dead. Wenwu is reformed. I'm going to keep Abomination on probation for those cage matches, and I don't really trust Razor Fist or Jai Ling at this point. I mean, are they going to break bad, or are they going to use the 10 rings for good? And then, of course, Wenwu, being reformed, he ends up dead. Man, R.I.P. Wenwu. Next, we have Eternals. That brings us Icarus, Sprite, Crow, and Arishem. And I realize it's kind of hard to define Arishem as a villain per se, but keep in mind, the MCU is told from humanity's perspective, so yeah, anybody living on planet Earth would definitely consider Arishem a villain. So by the end of the movie, we have 2 characters reformed and 1 dead. But of course, Icarus ultimately gives up his life and flies into the sun, making him yet another dead, reformed villain. All right, so next we have Hawkeye. That brings us Eleanor Bishop, Kazi, the return of Kingpin, the Tracksuit Mafia, Echo, and the return of Yelena. So by the end of the season, we have 1 dead. I was really struggling with Kazi and whether to consider him dead, but since he didn't show up in the Echo series, I'm assuming that she did indeed kill him. Now, Echo, I'm going to keep on probation, and Yelena, I mean, she stopped beating up Hawkeye, yes, but she's still hanging out with Val, so she's still on probation as well. Next, we have Spider-Man No Way Home. Oh my goodness, the return of all the classic Spider-Man villains. Green Goblin, Dr. Octopus, Electro, Lizard, and Sandman. We also get a droplet of Venom goo left behind, and the return of J. Jonah Jameson. By the end of the movie, we have 5 of them reformed, basically sent back to the original timelines, but I'm assuming that immediately created a branch, and they now have a chance to save themselves and live a better life. I'm going to keep the goo drop on probation because we don't know what it's up to, and I'm sorry, J. Jonah, I'm going to keep you as a villain. Dude just keeps spreading the lies online, so yeah, he's a villain. Next, we have Moon Knight. That brings us Harrow, Amit, Anton Mogart, the Midnight Man, and maybe the worst villain of the entire MCU, Moon Knight's mom. Oh my goodness, she is awful. By the end of the season, we have 3 of them dead and 1 alive, although R.I.P. the actor himself has passed away. Next, we have Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. That brings us Sinister Strange, the return of Wanda, who's on probation, Variant Mordo, Gargantos, and the Ribbon Monster. By the end of the movie, 2 are dead, and I'm going to keep Wanda alive because even Kevin Feige himself talked about that red flash of light at the end of the movie and whether or not that meant Wanda was, still alive. So we'll find out one way or another in Vision Quest. And yeah, I'm going to keep her on probation for now. Got to wait and see what her next action is going to be. Next, we have Miss Marvel. That brings us Najma and the Clandestines. In fact, she's going to represent all of them. And then there's Deaver. I mean, Damage Control is kind of sketch, but man, Deaver was the worst. So, by the end of the season, Najma does a heroic act, which of course means she ends up dying. Next, we have Thor, Love, and Thunder. That brings us Gore, Zeus, and Hercules. And of course, Gore became a reformed villain, which meant ultimately he did a sacrifice and died. Man, it is tough to be a reformed villain in the MCU. All right, next we have She-Hulk, Attorney at Law, and oh my goodness, so many villains in this series. So we have Todd, Titania, The Return of Abomination on probation, Leapfrog, The Wrecking Crew, Manbull, Saracen, Donnie Blaze, Josh, El Aguila, and Porcupine. So by the end of the season, I'm going to put everybody that was at Abomination's retreat as reformed, and that includes the Wrecker. I mean, some of them probably weren't even villains to begin with. They just looked really suspicious. However, Abomination, I'm going to keep him on probation. I mean, he did break out of jail at the end of the season. And then Donnie Blaze, yeah, dude is totally on probation till he does something good. Next, we have Werewolf by Night. That brings us Verussa, Azarel, Joven, Liorn, and Barasso. No surprise, by the end of that, all of them are dead. Lot of carnage in Werewolf by Night. Next, we have Wakanda Forever. That brings us Namor, Atuma, Namora, and Val on probation. By the end of the movie, I'm going to put Namor on probation. I mean, we don't really know what he's going to do next, and whatever it is, it's probably not good. And of course, Val is still on probation. She cannot be trusted. Next, we have Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. That brings us Kang, Darren Cross returning this time as MODOK, Krylar, Immortus, Ramatut, and Scarlet Centurion. By the end of the movie, Krylar is dead, MODOK is reformed, but of course, MODOK ends up dead. As for the main Kang up in the upper left-hand corner, I'm still not sure what to think of him. If he returns in Doomsday, then obviously he didn't die. Otherwise, I'm just going to assume he was sucked into that multiversal core and he died. Next, we have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. That brings us the High Evolutionary, The Return of Aisha, Warlock, Octohyena, Behemoth, and Warpig. By the end of the movie, lots of carnage. 4 of them dead, Warlock is reformed, and High Evolutionary is actually alive because James Gunn revealed that that was him being rescued by the Guardians at the end, and now he's being held in captivity at nowhere. Next, we have Secret Invasion. That brings us Gravik, Rava the Skrull, Pagan, Talos coming in as reformed, and Gaia. Man, tons of deaths in this one. Obviously, everyone on the top row is dead, but even Talos now becomes yet another reformed villain that died. And Gaia, I'm going to place her as reformed. Not sure if we'll ever see her again. We'll have to wait and see on that. Next, we have Loki Season 2. So we start the season with He Who Remains Dead. We have the return of Ravonna. Miss Minutes is totally a villain by the time we get to Season 2. We have the return of the reformed Loki and the return of the currently villainous Sylvie. Because remember, she just ditched and ran at the end of Season 1. So, as the season proceeds along, we find out He Who Remains is back again, right? But then by the end of the season, He Who Remains is dead. Miss Minutes, totally on probation. Do not trust her. Loki stays reformed, obviously. And now Sylvie is reformed as well. Next, we have the Marvels. That brings us Dar-Ben and the return of the Supreme Intelligence. But by the end of the movie, both of them are dead. Then we have What If Season 2. That brings us the return of Sinister Strange, who, remember, at the end of Season 1 was reformed. Of course, then he turns villainous. Then he gets reformed again, which, of course, means he ultimately dies. Man, that's just painful. Next, we have Echo. That brings us the return of Kingpin, Zane, Vicky, and the return of Echo on probation. By the end of the season, 2 are dead, and I'm going to keep Echo on probation because remember, that also is for anti-heroes, basically anyone willing to kill. Next is Deadpool and Wolverine, and obviously there were a lot of secondary villains in the movie, but I'm sticking to the main ones, and that is Paradox, Cassandra, Pyro, and Sabretooth. By the end of the movie, lots of death, and of course, Paradox in lots of trouble. Next, we have Agatha All Along. That brings us the return of Agatha, Death, the Salem 7, and the return of everyone's favorite, Ralph Boner. So by the end of the season, we have, technically, Agatha is dead and Death is alive. So go figure, right? But both of them are around, so we're going to keep both of them on probation, and I'm finally going to make Ralph Boner reformed. I mean, he did end up helping them in the end, and I'm really hoping he shows up in Wonder Man. Next, we have What If Season 3. That brought us the Eminence, the Incarnate, and the Executioner. By the end of the season, all 3 were reformed. And man, I really do hope that at least some of the characters from What If show up in live action during Secret Wars. We need a Watcher, if not multiple Watchers, big time. Next, we have Captain America Brave New World. That brings us the return of Ross, who's on probation, the return of the leader from all the way back in the first Hulk movie, Sidewinder, and Copperhead. By the end of the movie, everyone is still alive, but I'm definitely keeping Ross/Red Hulk on probation because we don't know what that dude's going to do next. I just hope we do get to see the Red Hulk again. Next, we have Daredevil Born Again Season 1. That brings us the return of Kingpin in his 6th appearance, Vanessa making a villainous turn, the return of Bullseye, Muse, Buck Cashman, Connor Powell, Cole North, Devlin, and Luca. By the end of the season, we have 2 deaths. Oh man, it was a bummer to see Muse go, but everybody else is still alive. I'm going to bet by the end of Season 2, however, there's going to be a ton more death. Next, we have the Thunderbolts. That brings us Yelena, U.S. Agent, Ghost, and Taskmaster, all on probation. Remember, both Bucky and Red Guardian are already reformed. It brings us Val, who's on probation, and it brings us Sentry. By the end of the movie, Taskmaster is dead. Basically, everybody else is reformed, except for Val. I do not trust that woman. Keep an eye on her. She's still up to no good. Next, we have Ironheart. That brings us the Hood, Mephisto, Zeke Stane, John King, Slug, the Blood Sisters, Clown, and Rampage. By the end of the season, we have 2 dead, and I'm going to put Zeke Stane on probation, but everybody else is staying in the villain category for now. Next, we have the Fantastic Four. That brings us Galactus, Silver Surfer, Doctor Doom, and the Mole Man. In animated form, it brings us the Puppet Master, Wizard, and Diablo, and then, in a cut scene that we only saw in the trailers, the Red Ghost. By the end of the movie, 2 are reformed, everybody else remains a villain. Then we have Eyes of Wakanda. That brought us the Lion, the Shield Maiden, the Blade Master, the Swordsman, and the Samoan Warrior. And by the end of the season, all of them were dead. And finally, we end with Marvel Zombies. Now, granted, I probably could have included 40-some villains that were demolished during all the carnage of this series. But let's face it, there's one villain that rises above them all, and that is Zombie Wanda. So that adds 1 more to our alive count. So, okay, these are the final numbers for the status of all the villains, at least the main ones, across the MCU. So does this surprise you at all? I mean, 127 dead, but 85 alive? Another 22 on probation, 34 reformed. In fact, let's take a look at a summary of the status of all these villains. All right, so first we have the dead secondary villains. So these are all humans. They're mostly just henchmen, but certainly cause trouble for our heroes. Then we have the dead secondary villains that are more like your aliens, someone from outer space, a lot of the different variants. So yeah, a lot of dead secondary villains. And next we have the dead primary villains. So I'm calling them primary if they were one of the main villains of the movie or show that they were in. Not necessarily saying these are my favorite villains in some cases, looking at you, Gravik, but still, they were very important villains in the movie or show that they appeared in. And, you know, some of these I'm really sad to see gone, especially Muse. Come on, man, Muse. They killed him way too fast. Then, though, we moved to what I'm calling primary peak villains. So this is just my opinion, but I think these 12 are some of the most painful deaths in the MCU, ones that I really, really would like to see these villains back again in some form or fashion. We may get another version of Thanos coming. We may even get another Ultron coming. We'll have to wait and see. Then we move to dead but reformed. So yeah, these are all the folks that started out villainous, got reformed, but then ended up dying in the process. Then we move to reformed. So these are all ex-villains. Notice the Thunderbolts taking control of that top row there. But these are all ex-villains that have then turned good. Then we move to the villains that are on probation. You know, they've given up being a villain, but haven't necessarily done anything heroic. And this also includes anti-heroes. So we're talking Punisher, Echo, Namor, you know, people who are willing to kill. So yeah, a lot of on probation villains. All right, so then we start to look at the villains that are still alive. And we've got a lot of villains still alive. Now, granted, these are kind of the secondary villains, the henchmen, etc. And obviously in the upper right-hand corner, those 3 actors have all passed away, RIP. So even though their characters are alive, we won't see them again. And finally, we move to the last category, which is alive primary villains. And granted, Marvel kills too many villains, that's for sure. But still, this is 40 villains, any of which I would love to see return again. And granted, Marvel's going to create even more over time, but yeah, this is a pretty deep bench of some really, really good villains. And speaking of primary villains, the late great Stan Lee wrote the book Bring on the Bad Guys in the mid-70s, and in it, he included the origins of all of his favorite villains. Well, now finally, in 2025, every one of these villains has made its way into the MCU because Mephisto and Doctor Doom have been introduced. Granted, Doctor Doom was just in a very, very short post-credit scene, but yeah, they're all part of the MCU. So let me know your thoughts on the state of villainy in the MCU. What did I get right? What did I get wrong? You know I love to read and respond to everything. Plus, don't forget, November contest, be a subscriber, leave a comment, win a book or a steelbook, and we have the membership option in case you're interested in that. And I promised I would talk about the What If Pitch contest on the Discord. Here are the rules, although it's very simple. All you have to do is join the Discord and provide either the title of your episode or a title and a summary, and notice the deadline is December 11th. Also, we have the Doomsday Countdown Watch, every day listed here at 7 p.m. Eastern. We watch a different movie or show as we head towards the December 18, 2026 release of Doomsday. So we have 2,500 members across the globe, conversations 24/7, and I'll leave a pinned comment so you can join. Also, if you don't mind, like this video, subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out more content, and we'll all continue to enjoy the ever-growing, the ever-changing Marvel Cinematic Universe.